now have been empowered by yourself and by myself to start engaging, and we hope that we will be able to fuel that engagement during our talks.
So let's continue to get reaction. We are joined in studio by Senior Research Fellow and Director at Africa-Asia Dialogues, Thembisa Fakude, in studio with us. We also have a Public Policy Specialist, TK Pooe, joining us via video link, and the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industries President, Mtho Xulu. Gentlemen, a good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. I actually do want to start with the business reaction. Mr. Xulu, what you make, would you describe that as a successful meeting?
Thank you very much, and good evening to the viewers and my fellow panelists, and to you as well. Look, we as a business actually welcome the fact that the moment has arrived. You would know that there's been a lot of anxiety over the whole year in terms of the strain that the relationship has taken, and all the threats that will come with the withdrawals of the AGOA and amongst other opportunities. So we welcome the fact that in the circumstances, the most important thing is that the two men are finally meeting. And we believe that beyond this press briefing, actually in the discussions, the president should be able to take President Trump through the substantive matters that hold us together economically. So we are happy that finally we can clear the air and move away from the anxiety and actually probably come up with a clear plan on how we reset the economic relations between the countries. So we welcome the meeting, and we're grateful that finally it has taken place.
Yeah, and we're going to analyze it some more, but in studio with us, Thembisa Fakude, of course. You know, just moments ago, we saw our reporter Ziyanda Ngobo speaking to Vincent Magwenya of the presidency, and he talks about how the likes of Johan Rupert were not prepared to speak. So there was a sense that they were surprised that they were given the opportunity to speak in that meeting, and I wondered if that meant that there was sufficient preparation for everyone that was sitting in the Oval Office. What do you make of the meeting?
Clearly not. There was no preparation. The three gentlemen were invited by Donald Trump, apparently. Cyril Ramaphosa must thank his gods, actually, that the three were there. Because if it was only him and his cabinet ministers, we would be talking something different. But for me, it was disappointing from the beginning to have had the minister and the presidency, when asked about the possibility of this embarrassment, and she retorted very quickly by saying Donald Trump won't invite the president to embarrass him. Alas, this is what exactly happened. So there is an element of, there was a lack of preparedness. And I've been in this business for a very long time, and sometimes you insist upon your counterparts in terms of the formatting of how you're going to brief the media. You know this trapping, you know that Donald Trump shoot from the hip. I would have said from the beginning that we are not interested in a sit down at the Oval Office, and you'll cite reasons why you wouldn't like that to happen. Because after this meeting, it's expected that there's going to be a joint press statement between the presidents. And that's where I think a lot of discussion have taken place. But to have allowed this and walk into the lines then and expect that Donald Trump wasn't going to shoot from the hip, I think it was a bit too optimistic and a little bit unprofessional. Something much more tougher stance that should have been taken in advance.
I mean, that was, of course, one of the key fears going into the meeting, was that whether or not we're going to see a Zelensky-esque moment in that Oval Office. How do you compare the two?
They brushed it off. South Africans were talking about this from when this announcement was made, that you are likely to have a repeat of a Zelensky moment. And both Vincent Magwenya and Khumbudzo Ntshavheni went on to say they don't think that will happen. And even if it does happen, Cyril Ramaphosa will be prepared. But they were not prepared themselves for this, for what happened today. And I think if there were no those three businessmen, particularly Johan Rupert, who actually helped the day to an extent, it would have been something much, much worse than what we've seen.
Okay, I want to get to a point where we analyze some of the weaknesses that you saw. But let's hear from TK Pooe. TK, good evening to you. Thembisa Fakude saying they simply weren't prepared. Do you think that our delegation at this very moment is proud of what was done publicly, and perhaps even in the working lunch that seems to have already concluded, with the president already having been seen leaving?
Well, look, that's probably the way I'd frame it, to say it was bearable. I think that's probably the word I'd go with, say it was bearable. Bearable because look, you never want to just work with a counterfactual, but in this instance, we know what the counterfactual is, which is a Zelensky moment. And from that instance, I think we did not want to go in that direction. However, there were certain things which we kind of do have to give the president, I think the word is props more than anything else, but I do get Mr. Fakude's point. Specifically, I think in terms of who you're dealing with, the fact that you should have probably insisted to have a closed session. I think that would have been a better way to go, because the individual you're dealing with is not exactly what's termed normal in the normal language of international relations. However, we are dealing with who we are dealing with, and in that instance, I can only judge it from that perspective. And in that instance, look, I think the President Ramaphosa did handle him quite well, but there were certain things which I did find a bit problematic, and two for me that do kind of stick out. Is this issue, which has long been in South Africa's foreign policy, is the fact that I think we're very poor at communicating what it is that we want to do as a country. And this is not a President Ramaphosa thing. This is it even goes back to President Jacob Zuma's time. And I put this at the feet of saying, when it comes to how you deal with countries such as America or the People's Republic of China, you need to almost dictate what your national interest is. And if you look at how we've been doing it for the last 10 to 15 years, we've been very poor at that. One of the things I lament is the fact that, listen, South Africa, like a lot of other countries, had the opportunity to have a linkages to the United States. Here I'm speaking about the Black Caucus. I think what we should have done ahead of this is to really make sure that we play those pun, I'm going to use the pun, trump cards, to ensure that, listen, even if this meeting goes in a bad Zelensky direction, we simply say, listen, what does the pain look like? And how can we make sure the next 3 years, when President Trump is going to be gone, that we really do solidify our relationships with America? And I think the second thing, which I think is a bit perturbing, it speaks to, and we have to, this is not so much a issue which was in our control, but internally within our country it was, is the fact of how we came across. And while I note what President Ramaphosa did, and yes, Mr. Fakude is correct in saying having those three individuals there, and I think Mr. Rupert and also the president of COSATU, I think came across well. Mr. Rupert was a bit clumsy in how he put things across, but his point was made is this should maybe give South Africans an insight into what the world really looks like in international relations. Because sometimes I think South Africans, we kind of get fooled by Parliament to think, oh, this is how the world works. No, South Africa, as President Ramaphosa said, we're a very small economy, meaning we need to get our house in order. We always need to be on point. And the fact that we've not had our economy on point for the last 15 years has brought us to this moment. I can guarantee you, if our employment numbers were high, and if we really had very good trade relations with countries other than the US, we would not be in that position where we almost seem like we were asking them for a favor.
Mr. Xulu, I want to bring that to you then. TK says we almost, towards the tail end there, saying we almost looked like we were asking for a favor. And I put down with the inverted quotes on my notes, that small economy, that moment really sticking out for me when the president described us that way. Johan Rupert saying we need Starlink, and what a discussion that has been in the past few days as well, the matter around granting Starlink a license. So speak firstly to me about what you hope will be the outcomes of the Starlink debate from a business point of view, and if we've been able to adequately say that we're going to be able to confidently tick the boxes on trade, get those tariff rates down, and would that really have been resolved in an hour-long working lunch?
Well, look, I think obviously if you want to start off with the conversation around Starlink, I think South Africa's business position has always been that we are always welcoming to innovation that comes from around the world. Not everything that is going to make us a great economy will come from homegrown solutions. So if there's an opportunity for us to bring in and adopt global technology that move us forward, indeed, we can always do that. And I think Starlink has never been, contrary to popular belief, victimized not to come into the country. I think we need to understand that there are certain rules of operating in South Africa, so we must balance regulation with opportunity. So indeed, if Mr. Musk is intent of joining South African's economy, I don't think anyone's going to stop him. And obviously, we just need to mention that we balance the commercial and the regulatory interest. Beyond that, yes, I think that the nature of the Oval Office press briefing, which are largely controlled by President Trump, you are never going to get a full impression of what the meeting will be. So you've seen that President Ramaphosa really tried to say, we are here really for economic cooperation, resetting that relationship, but also committing to global cooperation. He was drowned out because the President Trump never really wanted to entertain the economic stuff, but he did not say no about engaging further on business. And I think the President would have done better in the closed meeting, where he would have given the opportunity to go through the details about what makes South Africa, even though a small economy relative to America, but a strategic economy on the continent and a strategic economy in the global South. And I think if you'd given the time to break it down, he would have actually specified why South Africa remains strategic for the US. And obviously, the US is still strategic for us. So I don't think we are begging to be with the Americans. We just want to continue to be at the highest level of global trade. And America is part of the global infrastructure, and we can't shy away from it, over and above other opportunities from other parts of the world.
Yeah. Xulu, we really do appreciate your time. I know that we do need to release you, but thank you so much for your contribution. We will, of course, continue with TK Pooe as well as Thembisa Fakude on this one. We are, however, going to now speak to the MK Party spokesperson, Nhlamulo Ndhlela, joining us. So good evening to you, Mr. Ndhlela. Start off with just your initial reaction. Was that a successful exchange between the two countries?
Good evening, and good evening to your listeners. I don't see how that could have been a successful exchange when you have leaders, who so-called leaders of our country, going there and not dealing with the issues. Firstly, in terms of quelling the issue of the AfriForum's, issue on genocide and the Expropriation Act. And that alone was not coming through. And from that perspective, they actually failed. And this, more than anything else, was a trip facilitated to have discussions regarding to Starlink, a transaction which has been really shoved down our throats at this point, if you have to look at it. The mere fact that it has to even have, the U.S. president signing it off and the likes of Johan Rupert. I mean, what's Johan Rupert doing there? Again, this is just a clear demonstration that this was not nothing. This got nothing to do with diplomacy. This is a president that came to the U.S. cap in hand, and more than anything else, just a post-job subservient.
John Steenhuisen in that meeting, when asked to input on the issue around genocide and farm attacks, after the video presentation, if you will, saying that those two parties that you see represented in the video clip that was played are small opposition parties that don't really represent a big number. Of course, Donald Trump disputing that, looking at the numbers in the stadium where Julius Malema is concerned. But what do you make about that moment? Julius Malema and his followers singing Kill the Boer, and then, of course, your own leader, Jacob Zuma, also making a cameo appearance.
These are just clear desperate acts by leaders of the GNU to maintain this, Faustian pact between themselves and the ANC. So the issue of them bringing in the commander of the EFF and our president, Commander General President Zuma, is they're clearly playing politics here. And, it's a very dangerous game that they're playing. The majority of the people in this country, he can't refer to us as the minority. We represent the majority of the people, which is the black people of this country, the people who are the downtrodden people, the people that need us to emancipate them from the ills of apartheid, of which the DA stands for, and the DA has the same DNA that is anti the growth and emancipation of our people. So, of course, they're going to have that kind of a posture to create, a level of fear with the U.S., when it comes to MK and the EFF. The reality is, again, let's not forget, and if you look at it, those individuals that are there in support of this, those private sector capitalists, today we now can tell who were the people that were behind the CR17 statements and who funded Cyril. Remember, even the chairperson of the Federal Alliance of the DA stated categorically that they were persuaded by business to protect Cyril and to get the ANC, in this case, to agree to engaging with the DA to form this Faustian pact called the GNU. This is just a coalition of convenience. And that's what you're seeing there. You know, it's a you rub my back and I'll rub yours. That's what happened today, more than anything else. And they were just playing to the gallery. It's sad because also let's not forget that the days that were selected for them to be absent, specifically the president. I mean, we had a budget today. The man is absent. And let's not forget, if you just look at that budget is as absent as the president himself. You know, on Monday, this past Monday, there was a pala first day court hearing. He was absent again. And these dates are dates that he chose. So he knew very well that these dates were going to coincide, you know, with the pala case. They were going to coincide with the budget. And he chose to go for his own personal expedition with his racist neo-colonial friends, you know, as opposed to taking the country as seriously as it should be. I mean, we're at a crisis where you're sitting with a budget 3.0. The man is absent, busy looking at videos, being subservient, and trying to appease imperialists. I mean, what kind of president do we have here? And now people will get to understand why we said we will never, ever work with the ANC of Ramaphosa, because it has a neo-colonial posture, it is backed by imperialists, and it has no agenda or focus in terms of ensuring that it emancipates the people of this country. For him, Ramaphosa, being a president of this country is a side hustle, nothing else.
Nhlamulo Ndhlela, the spokesperson for the MK party, and we'll get reaction to what we've heard from the MK party as well, but let's hear from Frank in Polokwane. Frank, one of our callers. Thank you for calling in, Frank. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm well, sir. Talk to us.
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, I'm very much disappointed, man. Yeah, I want to start with the pictures that were presented prior to the presentation of the President Donald Trump, of the grievous pictures which were paraded, which are false news. And secondly, the President opted to take ordinary civilians members who accompanied him as the President to defend the country. Those civilian citizens I'm talking about, your host, and who is that man? Rupert is not a member of parliament, is not even in government, but President opted to take them to America to defend the sovereignty of our country. Thirdly, black ministers were not even given a platform to engage Donald Trump about what's happening in South Africa. And what I'm very much disappointed is that our international relations minister was not even given a platform. They were just there paraded, or they were there on holiday to just accompany the president with his friends to play golf there in America. There was nothing discussed. Okay. And right now, the spokesperson of the president was saying that that was a political theater. That was not a political theater. It was a statement that was issued by the White House and by the Washington. Because right now, the president defense said, no, the real talks are behind the scenes. The president, right now, they're engaging on real matter.
Okay, Frank, I need to move on. Yeah, but thank you so much. Quite a mouthful that you've given us as well. We appreciate it. We'll continue taking your calls on 0105946010. Thembisa, just a lot to look at here. You've got Nhlamulo Ndhlela, who says this was a personal expedition for President Cyril Ramaphosa. That today was an important day. We had Budget 3.0, and he describes him as an absent president. Which for the president should have been more important on a day like this?
I think, no doubt, this was a very important meeting. And it was not pre-planned, by the way. The president got to know about this a couple of days after those other dates and diaries were confirmed. And he had to travel to the United States. South Africa has been knocking at the doors of the United States since the days of Ibrahim Rasool. And eventually they gave the president time, date to travel to the United States. He couldn't say no to that. And it would be very unreasonable and unfair to have expected the president to have said no to that invitation. But one important point, I think we've ventilated this discussion. I don't see Donald Trump ever raising this again. I think what you are likely to see moving forward is business, the improving of relations between South Africa and the United States. And it was important that this got ventilated in the manner in which it was ventilated. We are likely to see now a much more constructive engagement between South Africa and the United States. You're also likely to see Donald Trump coming to South Africa for G20 meeting, which is something that many of us were doubting whether it was going to happen. Judging by what happened today, you're likely to see Donald Trump coming in. But also importantly, you saw President Cyril Ramaphosa and the three other gentlemen massaging the ego of Donald Trump. We need you. You know, your partnership is essential to the growth and importance of our economic growth and development in South Africa. And I think he liked that. So it was a crucial meeting. It was tense. It was important that that particular issue of genocide get ventilated. What else are we going to talk about after this? There's actually nothing else to talk about on this particular issue. But what you're likely to see, you're going to see more business discussions taking place. And I think this meeting that just concluded now would have tackled all those kind of issues. And there's a reset button was pressed, and you're going to see a new relationship moving forward.
You've got Frank who calls in and calls the three civilians, that being Rupert and Elson and such. And I want to actually bring you in here, TK, because that for me was a moment when we saw Johan Rupert standing up, and this is after John Steenhuisen has just spoken about the government of national unity. Johan Rupert then being given an opportunity to speak, and one of the things that he did was say, this gentleman, John Steenhuisen, leads a party that, of course, governs in the Western Cape, and in fact, it is in the Cape Flats where we have the highest murder numbers. But Frank says they're civilians, they should not have been there. Could this meeting have gone better without them?
Well, look, I think on that one would probably have to park it. And maybe as I stated previously, that South Africans sometimes, look, we know what we know, and international relations is a different place and point altogether. So I think what we can basically say is, yes, look, they were invited, and I think that part has to be stressed on the invitation of President Trump. Again, maybe just to relate it to home, he is the hosting man. It's his home, the White House, even though it belongs to all Americans. So on that one, we could not do anything else. But the intervention you speak of, when I said that, I think it was good that Mr. Rupert said what he said, but I said in a rather clumsy way that, look, and I think the spokesperson of the president also said it, that these are not people who are probably used to the political arena. So you and I having a conversation in private is quite different to you and I having it and it having ramifications throughout the rest of the Republic in terms of it being a presidency type level. So some of the words, for instance, he was correct in saying, look, Mr. Steenhuisen being here represents something. Now, I would not have added the part to kind of air dirty laundry, the fact that we all know in South Africa we've got a crime problem, because I think that came out a bit too much in the conversation. You know, there's always a rule of thumb which says don't air your dirty laundry outside. But his main point, I think, was made quite well, which is to say crime affects everyone. Where I think he kind of missed it a bit is this idea of Starlink. And for me, one of the disappointments would be if after all of this is done, Starlink is allowed in South Africa. I think Mr. Elon Musk has not ingratiated himself to the South African public and also the business opportunity he's given. You know, the fact that he simply wants to come and ride roughshod over the rest of the telcos like, let's say, Telkom, MTN and Vodacom. He can't allow such an entity to come in here. So I'm going to find that to be quite interesting. Because in truth, if you look at what Starlink represents, it's not as though he's going to be setting up millions of jobs in the country. His company and the way Starlink works doesn't actually allow for that. So for me, the hope would be if our sovereignty is for real, if today and things get smoothed over, that should not come in there. But I think it's quite normal in other places. If you see how presidents travel or prime ministers travel, you do invite certain civilians. But in this context, we have to be very clear from what I've heard, and I think I stand to be corrected. It was not necessarily on the invite of the president of the Republic of South Africa, but rather it was on the invite of the president of the United States of America that the golfers and Mr. Rupert were invited.
Okay. Kallie Kriel is joining us. Of course, he's with AfriForum. Kallie, a good evening to you. Now, the president has also been to the White House to speak to the Trump administration. What do you make of that meeting?
Yes, good evening to you, ma'am. No, I think it went as well as it could. The fact is, we could have had a situation where there was a total breakdown in the discussions. And of course, we all want in the country that there should be a good trade agreement with the US. So that is good. The other aspect that for us is good is that it's clear that real issues cannot be swept under the carpet. And that I think the message is quite clear that we need to, if we want to save the relationship with the US, get away from this whole concept to downplay any issue and saying it's purely misinformation or a misunderstanding. And I think the basis has now been laid for people to say, okay, there are real issues, let's address them. And both parties are committed to further discussions, which is good from AfriForum side. We will also play our role to make sure that we also make proposals to the ANC-led government, as well as in our meetings with the ANC, to see what solutions can we get, solutions that no party should be humiliated in the process. And I think that is in the interest of us all. So I am hopeful. This was, of course, a harsh meeting, but I think it laid a foundation to get real solutions, and we are happy with that.
Is there a sense, Kallie, from AfriForum's point of view, that what we saw was that delegation almost cleaning up after a can of worms that one could argue was opened by yourselves? I mean, the very intention behind this, the president, of course, consistently saying that this is about trade, but we know that when we got there, we were met with, there are white Afrikaners that are being persecuted and the delegation needing to work incredibly hard. I mean, is there a sense that you take some responsibility for this to be necessary?
No, I think if one would say who opened the can of worms, it's not AfriForum chanting genocidal calls for somebody to be killed. It's not AfriForum that refuses to condemn this. It's President Ramaphosa that refused to condemn it. He now sat in the White House and said, no, they condemn it. When we wrote to him, we've had a very negative reaction from his spokesperson. He refused to condemn that. The fact that the highest court in this country also refused or legalized this, that is the can of worms that has been opened. It is the signing of the Expropriation Act by President Ramaphosa that opened the can of worms. It's him signing the Ndhlela Act that opened the can of worms. So those are the root causes. And that is our view was from the start. If President Ramaphosa and his delegation would go there to tell the Americans, you know what, you don't really know what's going on. They'll see it as an insult because they've got an embassy in South Africa. They've got a State Department. They've got intelligence services. The fact is, when we got to the US, they knew a lot. Even last year, there was a bill tabled at the House of Representatives saying, and it was tabled by both Democrats and Republicans, asking for a review of the relations with South Africa. And then they listed a number of issues that we never mentioned to them. So our effort was to say, don't punish the people of South Africa. You could say, let's just deny these problems, then we will just lose our trade relationship. So to save it, you have to be loyal to the country and loyal enough to come out strongly to say, this Expropriation Act is dangerous, crime is a real problem for all people, but you cannot have one category of crime where people call for that crime and it's not being condemned. So those are the issues that will need to be addressed. And but I'm thankful. I think, yeah.
Yeah. No, just stay with us, Kallie. We're not done. TK, I see you shaking your head as Kallie speaking there. What do you make of his response to that question around, was this to some extent the doing of AfriForum that we needed to get to this point?
Look, I think we shouldn't sugarcoat it. The main reason we're here is because AfriForum, rather than winning internal battles in South Africa, took this overseas. Let's not forget that, look, in President Trump's first term, this is when AfriForum began this. And I seem to remember them going to the European Union, and the European Union did not even give them the time of day because there is no such thing as a white genocide in South Africa. And there's a crime problem. But again, for us too, I think when you contextualize it properly, that's why even President Trump, in the video he used, it's not really based on any real credible sources. It's an AfriForum fabricated news entity. There's a reason why the United Nations, even our own courts in South Africa and other countries in the world have not taken this seriously. It's because it's a baseless accusation. And the very fact that Mr. Kriel is able to come here and say our country, our patriotism is a bit of a, it's a bit of a funny thing. Because if this was true, why has he not been able to get all South Africans to say, listen, Mr. Kriel, you're correct. South Africa's got many, many problems, and South Africans are quite open about it. But one of the problems South Africa doesn't have is a white genocide problem. And probably the final point, if everything he's saying, and even if Mr. Trump really does believe this, Mr. Trump spoke about thousands of white South Africans wanting to go there. I fully understand that Mr. Kriel and Mr. Trump might not be au fait with counting of numbers, but if I'm not mistaken, the numbers of white South Africans that have gone over as of last week was only 49 or 50. So where is this rush for people to go over there? So I think we have to hold people like Mr. Kallie Kriel responsible for what is happening, because it's them who decided to take South Africa's problems outside when they could have made sure that internally these things get sorted. The very own community, Afrikaner community, is not exactly thrilled about what they've done.
TK, in that meeting you've got, and Kallie, I'm going to come to you for this one. In that meeting, you've got the video that's played afterwards, an image that Trump then beams for those in the room to look at, and it's got little white spots, and it shows thousands of, he says, white crosses, and right there, those are the bodies of dead white Afrikaners, saying that, I mean, he went as far as to say the heads are being chopped off, and I mean, very, very, very descriptive. And then you had President Cyril Ramaphosa asking Trump, where exactly is that? Can you tell me where exactly this image is taken from? And Trump saying, I don't know, but somewhere in South Africa. I mean, what do you make of that moment that, I suppose is how Trump brings forward the proof of this persecution and murder of whites in South Africa? Did he argue his case correctly?
There's a word for it. It's called fake news.
No,
and
sorry.
There's a reason why.
Sorry, TK. I want Kallie to take this one. Apologies. Kallie?
Okay. No. Thank you so much. No, that picture was taken in Nombandin in KwaZulu-Natal, where a couple was murdered, shot brutally, and there was a protest. People very angry, rightfully so, because that was a real murder. And that cannot be downplayed, as we've heard from TK or President Ramaphosa previously saying there's no such thing as farm murders. So those were real murders. That was a real protest, and that was within South Africa. So that was totally correct to have that visuals there. I think it was necessary to also bring that strong point about, because people go into denialism. Nobody ever said that there aren't any other murders. From AfriForum side, we are one of the organizations that works the hardest against violence against women and children with Advocate Kriel. But nobody says, there's also other violence against men, so don't take on this issue. We are saying there's a lot of crime.
Okay.
What makes murders different is no other category of crime are there people calling for people to be killed. In other categories of crime that are serious, government makes it a priority crime. Gang violence is a priority crime. Even rhino poaching is priority crime.
I need to rein you. Just apologies, Kallie. Apologies. I need to rein you back in here because I want to sit with this issue. You say this was in KwaZulu-Natal. I'm keen to hear how you were able to get that information of what it was exactly that Trump was showing when a room full of people in the Oval Office, officials from both countries, unable to identify where that image was taken from. That's the first thing. Number two, you say, yes, there was a protest and there were people that died. Was it white people? How did they die? When was this protest? And what was it about?
Yeah. Yes, if you give me a chance, I can.
Sure.
There was a media article. It was in 2020, it happened. Two people were shot, elderly people were brutally shot on their farm. Their dogs were killed as well, and there was nothing stolen. And nobody has been apprehended for that. And that is really the problem, because in no other category of crime would you, if there is a picture, now people start questioning it? I think that's a real problem. People are trying to downplay this. That is disrespectful towards the victims of that. And you know what? President Ramaphosa and his government doesn't have to agree with President Trump, and there can be debates about these, what should the definition be, but there can be a solution. Simply condemn, kill the boer, kill the farmer, might also make farmers a priority climb like others, and cooperate with the community to make it safe in all spheres. That is a simple solution. But we've also, TK spoke about going to the US, not solving it here. We wrote to President Ramaphosa. He simply ignored it. Also with regard to the Expropriation Act, we wrote to him. He didn't even answer our letter. When there was at least an answer in negotiations with regard to the Bella Act, the president nominated a team to negotiate with our colleagues at Solidarity at Ndhlela. And there was an agreement. But afterwards, he just denied. He actually lied. He said he did not mandate that discussion. So for him to go to Parliament and say, we need South African solutions for South African problems, I agree with him. But then don't ignore us. And hopefully what we saw today is that the reality is now we need to solve it here. If we want peace with the US, and AfriForum extends a hand of friendship to say, let's solve these issues. We are open to cooperate.
Okay. Kallie Kriel of AfriForum, thank you for your time. Thembisa Fakude, what do you make of that?
Well, I just hope the AfriForum does not do the same thing next time they don't get their way. Because this is a very dangerous precedent, where you have a civil society organization that feels that the country is not listening to them. As a result, they'll go and gang up with some strong men from other countries to come and put pressure on their own country. It's an extremely bad precedence. But importantly, I just hope that organizations such as AfriForum and Solidarity do take into consideration that amongst those that get killed in these farms, many of them are black people. And the statistics that they provided to Trump, did they take that into consideration or not? Because you know that a lot of black people get killed during these farm attacks. And the exaggeration of that video, clearly, of course, it was provided by...
You call it an exaggeration?
Absolutely. It was provided by AfriForum. Trump talked about each and every cross represents a dead body. Kriel says there are only 3 people.
He says 2.
2 people that were killed. So it's a misrepresentation, it's false, and it's extremely dangerous. And I think, importantly, one hopes, of course, that at some point President Cyril Ramaphosa is going to read the Riot Act to these 2 particular organizations in terms of how to behave moving forward. Or else there's a case to be made. We've wasted so much money going to lobby and trying to convince Trump that the entire information that had been provided by these organizations was false. It's costly. It is costing a lot of money to the taxpayers to have had that meeting. And you have Kallie Kriel coming in and casually telling us that I've spoke to Cyril Ramaphosa, basically saying if he doesn't do it, if he does it again, I'm going to go to Donald Trump and report him again. So President Cyril Ramaphosa, it is hoped that henceforth he's going to read the Riot Act to AfriForum and be strong. If he can't, he must call his political party, the ANC, to read a Riot Act to AfriForum and Solidarity. This is not on. It's costly and it's just a waste of time for the entire country.
What would those steps look like? That is the question. If you had the president or the ANC reading the Riot Act, what's the step they take? But we'll get into that in a moment. Let's bring in more guests. Black Management Forum's Managing Director, Ndhlela, also joins us as we continue to react to President Cyril Ramaphosa in the Oval Office there, flanked by ministers and, of course, businessmen and golfers there as he interacted with President Donald Trump and his team, wanting to talk trade, but, of course, needing to do the work then of dispelling some of the perceptions created around white persecution in South Africa. Monde, a good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's start with your view on how we've dealt and represented South Africa. Did we sell the right picture of South Africa? Will we be able to perhaps see a massaging of trade relations after that interaction?
Very good evening to the fellow colleagues on the platform and also in the studio, and also to your viewers. I think firstly, we must commend President Ramaphosa in how he handled the situation, a very, very tough approach. And of course, we always knew that there would be some kind of curveball that would come. And there's only so far you can prepare for it. Of course, you don't know what will come on the other side. But it was clear as the engagements were going that there was a specific issue that President Trump wanted to raise with South Africa. And in particular, as the guests have been unpacking the issues as we were coming onto the platform around the white genocide. But at the heart of it, when we begin to analyze it, we actually have an issue around how should South Africa approach its transformation project, because at the heart of the land issue is the legislation of the Expropriation Act and other legislations around that. So we've seen Black economic empowerment being attacked quite viciously for a long protracted time. So at the heart of all of these matters, it is actually the question of how should South Africa approach its transformation project? And all these issues on the side, they are leading to that fundamental question, because the legislation is being attacked in a very systematic way, in a calculated way. And Black economic empowerment has always had detractors right from the beginning. So it's actually not a brand new thing. It's an old challenge, even dating as far back as when employment equity was promulgated. So President Ramaphosa, in his approach, not to react, to demand that where the facts on the issues on the table. South Africa does have a crime-ridden problem as well. And even when you speak about whether it's farm murders or murders across the board, it also includes Black people. So at the heart of this matter is actually the question of how is South Africa faring in transforming its country, and how should that be approached? Are we still on the right track? Are we having the right conversation? And which voices are still there? And which voices are not accepting the approach South Africa has taken around transforming its country? And on the race question, that transformation is actually going beyond the race issue. You can't just leave it at the race issue only.
Yeah.
Because in transforming a country and a nation, you are rebuilding its capability, its capacity, its business, its civil society to be integrated so that the country can become globally competitive on every angle. So the quality of leadership, the quality of products and services, the quality of thinking. So you want to unleash the potential of the country. And that is why we are saying, actually, at the heart of this issue is the question of how is South Africa faring on its transformation project.
The transformation project at the heart of it. Do you remember this moment? I mean, this was essentially part of the presentation prepared by President Donald Trump, the video presentation. And it was interesting to look at the look on President Cyril Ramaphosa's face as those video clips played. Let's take you back there. Take a look.
Yes, honorable member. Must never be scared to kill. A revolution demands that at some point there must be killing, because the killing is part of a revolutionary act. Shoot to kill. Namaza. Kill the poor, the farmer. Kill the poor, the farmer. Pa, pa.
The man of DA in PE is a white man. So these people, when you want to hit them hard.
Tough moment. Not an easy one. TK, I'm sure that you were glued to the screen, particularly at that moment? What do you think that was, that the president would have been feeling, or were you in his shoes? Is that shame, concern? What do you characterize as what would have been going through his mind at that point?
Well, look, I would like to be a psychologist on that one, but look, he was processing it, obviously. You could tell he was processing it. But I think the bigger thing on his mind would have just been the utter shock at seeing what I said is basically it's fake news. If you take a lot of those clips and you put them within context, they've got a context. And the context is South African politics, and parties like the EFF and the MK tend to be quite honest about what they feel South Africa represents. For Mr. Trump, that was a shock because, as you currently know, in America, the question of race and what race represents has actually been suppressed. We're in South Africa. One of the lucky things about us is that we can freely say that, listen, we've got a history of colonialism and we've got a history of apartheid. It's quite normal for us. So for me, it wasn't so much that I was looking at President Ramaphosa, because you could tell he was just processing almost like, where's this guy coming from? I was looking at more President Trump because you could see how glued he was to the narrative of these whites are being oppressed, that there's some white genocide. Because I'm looking at it, for me, I'm looking more at President Trump. And I think what this really touches on, and it's something which we really do kind of need to quickly get au fait about, and our government needs to understand, is the global world has changed. Parties and people like President Trump are now becoming the norm. He's not isolated in what he believes. What is key and important about communication now is, yes, there is a message. You can't always control what the message is, such as today. But the second part of communication is how you interpret it and how you take that message back.
Okay.
And I think President Ramaphosa did well, but I think what our government and other governments in the world are basically trying to tell us is to say, you kind of need to almost educate people like President Trump to understand context and history. Because if you do not, you literally allow them to do fake news and continue things such as what Mr. Kriel was saying. And I note that Mr. Kriel never touched on the issue of white genocide, because that's how they started this issue of communication. Because it's easy now to retreat and say it's not genocide, it's now killings. So I think we really do need to kind of educate South Africans and people like Mr. Trump to say, listen, you need to be on top of communication going forward.
Yeah. Monday, I'm just going to give you your opportunity to give us your final thoughts. But again, #genocide, is that now behind us?
Well, indeed, we're hoping that it should be behind us, as like we're suggesting that we need to get to the core of the issue and some of these issues that have been driven through some of these processes. But at the heart of the matter is that South Africa is on a transformation journey. South Africa must transform, and South Africa must be clear on that path to transforming. It includes white people. It does not exclude white people. It includes them because they're part of this country. And when we say we, the people of South Africa, as the preamble of the Constitution, it includes all races, it includes all creeds, it includes all colors, it includes all ideas, all peoples, to ensure that we heal the divisions of the past. And that is clearly explicit in the Constitution, and also on the equality side of one of the sections of the Constitution, that we've got to drive an equality perspective. So we've got to level the playing field. We've got to stay focused on the fact that we need to unleash the potential of this country, and we've got to do it in a particular way that includes the contribution of our white counterparts. And really, we appeal to them on a continuous basis that this transformation project must include their contribution to it. And we have seen a few of them embracing actually not just the narrative, but also its substance of what transformation truly means, that it transforms our thinking and our hearts around how the country should operate, the inclusion of those who've been excluded, majority have been Black people outside of the economic mainstream. It also includes the overhaul of the legislative framework, which was introduced through the Constitution around the transformational laws, which are creating these opportunities to level the playing field, and it has given birth to the Black middle class, etc. And even through the same process of BE has made white people wealthy as well. So white people actually were included in how these processes were moving forward. So we need to stay focused on actually the transformation project of the country.
Okay, great stuff. I'm going to leave it there with you gentlemen that are joining us via video link. Thank you so much. Monday, of course, is with the Black Management Forum. Thanks as well to TK Pooe, who is a political science professor at the Wits School of Governance. Mr. Fakude, lots to discuss. there is, on the outcomes of the back of this meeting, there's the bigger geopolitical discussion. And where now we rank, if we've come out stronger and said, well, you know, we've got some leverage now, and if that's something that's seen. You've got that moment where President Ramaphosa talks about when Zelensky was here in South Africa and the phone call between himself and Donald Trump, in a sense that we're both working towards peace. We're both peacemakers. What do you make of that?
I think it was an interesting answer from Donald Trump, but importantly, the ICJ question was brushed off, which means, therefore, that South Africa, at least for now, is off the hook. And the fact that Donald Trump invited Cyril Ramaphosa to talk at the White House suggests a new trajectory in terms of a relationship. As I've said earlier on, I think this was ventilated. It's now exhausted. We are likely to move on from here. And I think it was an appropriate space, and the noises that surrounded how this was raised was also appropriate. To an extent, it was typical South African style. And I think now we can concentrate on things that really matter, which is the business and resetting of this relationship between South Africa and the United States.
But will we see a reversal of the pronouncements of Liberation Day, and I say that with inverted commas, around how we're being charged to trade with the US, number one? Did we manage to possibly save AGOA?
Well, I think these discussions that took place after that sitting are certainly going to be ironed out. Donald Trump has said that he expects each country to come and negotiate with him, and South Africa is there to negotiate. And the fact that they're negotiating a tariff, it means that AGOA is out the window. But you are likely to have a Cyril Ramaphosa that's going to go in a charm offensive of Donald Trump. And I think you're likely to see a new relationship in earnest between the two leaders that will be beneficial to this country.
An easier job moving forward for a special envoy? Is it time for us to get an ambassador into the US?
I think so. I think it's an easier time for a special envoy, and you're likely to have an ambassador coming in. The whole thing was business. The whole thing was to try and push and twist our hands to relax certain conditions on Elon Musk's Starlink's business. But I think he also got a message. And this is why he refused to actually even comment, because he is in desperate need for South Africa, not only for his Starlink business, but for rare earth minerals, which we have plenty of, including our influence on the DRC, which is the country that currently the United States is doing big business with. Without us and without our influence, that business won't succeed. I
mean, he wasn't our special envoy, Thembisa Jonas, not in that meeting. A lot of questions around why that would be. Elon Musk, you mentioned, not speaking in that meeting. I think a lot of expectation was that we'd be hearing a lot from Elon as a South African-born billionaire and advisor to the president. Marco Rubio also not in the room. What is I suppose, the message from the US when they're seemingly a lot more subdued, if they will, in how they bring together their team that supports the president?
Well, I think the most important thing for Donald Trump, Donald Trump is transactional. This was not by chance. So besides the business that Elon Musk was going to be doing, if you look at what has been happening for the past couple of days, from the time he visited the 3 Gulf countries and his rapprochement towards Iran, his meet and greet with Ahmed al-Sharaa, the president of Syria, and just continual discussions with the Middle East. For me, it suggests that there is a decoupling between Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. And this was one of those messaging. So all the arch enemies of Israel, basically Trump is now speaking to them. And the last one to do so was South Africa. And this is why when he was asked about ICJ, just brushed it off. He's sending a message. So he achieved his objective. One is to communicate to Benjamin Netanyahu that it's new business henceforth, but importantly, to pave that way for Elon Musk to do business in South Africa, and that's exactly what you're going to see happening henceforth.
Yeah, very interesting.